Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us here on our live Google Hangout. My name is Anna Wary.
And I'm Drew Mulhern.
And we are just 2 of the 36 participants in the first US Squared program.
Over the next hour, you'll hear from up-and-comers in the industry on the future of digital advertising and the digital consumer. As advertisers, we are constantly playing catch-up, and we need to be armed with the knowledge on how to engage with consumers, where they are, and how they behave. We're going to cover some relevant and thought-provoking topics within the digital landscape currently and where we think this is going.
And while you're here with us on the Hangout, engage with us on Twitter at @SquaredUS. There we'll be asking you to put any of your questions that you have during the next hour, and we'll be selecting a few to answer during our panel Q&A.
So here's a quote. My dear, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast as that. So this is a quote from Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland. We feel that this quote actually sums up the current state of our industry. To keep up with consumers, we need to move twice as fast. Those advertisers with foresight into where consumers are going online and how they are changing their behaviors will be able to shape the future of digital advertising.
But before we can talk about the future, let's take a look back at just a few ways that the space has progressed in recent years. We all know that content consumption habits have evolved over time. One way is how we consume TV content. No longer are the days of the family sitting around one TV set. Instead, they're sitting around it with a tablet, a mobile phone, or computer, consuming content from multiple sources and many locations, which is leading to a fragmentation of our audience. And with 3/4 of the TV watching population turning to online at least once a week, the consumer is now the one deciding what to consume and when to consume it. As this model continues to change, we'll need to be agile and innovative in our practices to deliver relevant and targeted messages.
Here's a comparison of the 2005 Pope benediction and the 2013 benediction at the Vatican. What you'll notice is in 2005, there's only one phone in the audience, and it's actually, I think, a razor, versus 2013, where every person is holding a phone or a tablet. What we can take away from this is that technology is moving extremely fast, and consumers are moving even quicker to integrate these new technologies into moments that matter for them.
So looking at these specific examples, we can see that consumer behavior has evolved. And we know that there is a lot more below the surface that is influencing these changes, which makes it even harder to predict what the future is going to bring. However, by identifying key consumer behaviors, we may be able to get ahead of the curve. We've identified 5 ways our industry is adapting to reach consumers where they are. And over the next 30 minutes, Brian Stuckey will be moderating flash discussions on differing perspectives on how we may evolve our practices to effectively reach them in the future. Over to
Yeah. All righty. Thanks, guys, for that lovely intro. Here's what we're going to do. We have 5 topics, 5 minutes to debate each topic, and 2 different debaters per topic. I downloaded this Horn app, which will mark when the time is up, but this is my rodeo, so if I want to let them talk longer, I can do that. Alrighty, so first up, we have Jeff and Aaron. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. I also noticed that I did not get the jacket memo, so points deducted for you. Anyway, the question. The TV landscape continues to evolve and viewership continues to change. We all know that. Some alarmist trade articles have even gone so far as to say that TV is dead. Is that true, though? Or is it more that the way in which we consume video is changing? What does the consumption of video really look like in the future?
Well, Ryan, Jeff, let me kick this one off.
Kick it off.
I think it's fair to say, as your resident television guy, that TV is not from dead, and I think that's a very silly thing to say. We have over 115 million homes with TV. 87% of that is an HD home. Do you think those people are buying their HD homes to sit up on their table as furniture? No, I don't think
I've done that.
Well, you're an anomaly, because
Yes.
people are buying this
Correct.
to watch
People tell
television,
me that.
high quality HD. But I do think it's really important to understand where we are in the present to go forward about our consumption. So my theory is that we need to rebrand TV to VT, which means video time.
Yo, hold on,
There you go.
wait.
Oh.
Let me just kick it off with some local flavor here, right?
Okay.
Let me give you some knowledge bombs, okay? If you take a look over the course of a 30-day period, right, the average consumer consumes about 150 hours of content over the course of 1 month, okay? The majority of that takes up is TV over all other platforms, okay? You want to talk about scale?
Even table TVs?
That too.
Okay.
Even like the beer pong one. Cool. All right. You want to talk about scale too? Let's talk about YouTube versus TV, all right? Over the course of 30 days, it takes YouTube 1.5 billion uniques, and at that same time, TV hits that in 1 day.
So I get it, Jeff. And that's an impressive point, because I am here to say that TV is not dead. It's quite alive. But I think we need to understand the shift. We're talking about video consumption right now. You know what? So video is moving to different places. In the last 12 months, mobile consumption is up 33%, and spending time on your internet, on your laptop, is up over 10%. That means that they're taking time away from their traditional linear screen to do it. So we have to understand the habits of video consumption.
Right, point taken, but people do care about linear TV, meaning that it's must-see TV. People care about their local sports, right? And people care about their local news too. Not to mention, obviously, they don't want to hear about, you know, if their child is missing at 10 o'clock, right? So I think that's definitely important to recognize. Those are the ratings winners, right? But at the same point, I will agree upon that, yes, time shifting is a big problem, and we do have to account for the ratings erosion. What is a ratings erosion? It's basically, it's basically viewership loss, and we have to account between the rating in real time all the way through a 7-day mark. So again, at the same point, we do have to counteract on how we can still reach that influential target, meaning our younger adult millennials.
So, Jeff, let me just play one thing to just understand, you know, just for everybody to understand that television, you know, there's still strength in it from the live viewership of sports-driven and your appointment television. You have shows like Scandal, Sons of Anarchy, American Horror Story. That's appointment television. But we're talking about consumption and where it's going. Look where it extends to. It extends to different properties. Clips are on Hulu. We have people talking about it on Twitter. So consumption is traveling. So we have to move towards the video understanding.
Okay, guys, 1 minute left. Knowing that both you guys are TV buyers, and knowing that consumption is changing, how do you think that will affect your guys' jobs in the future?
Well, I think it's really, really imperative to understand that we must break down barriers starting today. The future of television is happening now. It's not happening in a year from now. We have to understand these behaviors. So we have to work within our agencies and our clients and work between cross-disciplines, cross-channels, so we develop a better product and practice for our clients. Times are changing. We don't want to get left behind.
Right. So, yeah, just to share some love with you, you know, it's just important that we understand the evolution of video consumption, right, as it creates more channeling, which enables us to be more complementary to our TV schedules, just in order for us to understand ways that we can reach and speak to our consumer over the course of time.
And that's time. That's time. Great job, everybody. Nice job. Great job. All right. Next up, we have Paul and Kayla. Let's give me a hand. Give me a hand. Nothing like a live studio audience at a Google Hangout. Okay. So Paul works in programmatic, and Kayla is more in the strategy and planning side. So this should be a good one because the topic is indeed programmatic. As we look at the future of digital advertising, one thing that isn't going anywhere is programmatic buying. Right now, it's a top trend on Adweek, and 87% of brands and agencies plan to spend at least 50% more on programmatic buys of desktop display, mobile, and video advertising in the next 6 months. Since you guys are from different backgrounds, how do you both see the future of programmatic shaping up?
Okay, like Brian said, Kayla, I mean, you're from more of a strategy side, I'm more a planning side, I'm more from a programmatic media buying side. So I know that the strategy side certainly has some concerns when it comes to programmatic, so I think we could hash them out here.
Yep.
Hash them out.
Let's hash them out. Absolutely. I will start off by saying that I think we agree, Paul, but correct me if I'm wrong, that if we are looking at digital in terms of adapting to consumer needs, then programmatic is the future. I mean, so often consumers are bombarded with ads that mean nothing to them. They're usually irrelevant to them and what they want, and therefore they see low engagement. So programmatic does have the ability to serve the right message to the right consumer at the right time. But that's only if it's done correctly, and I think a big concern for a lot of people is my ad being put on the right site?
Okay, so that's kind of a common misinterpretation of programmatic. I mean, with the latest PMP controls, they actually allow for greater transparency and contextual controls, which actually allow for better optimization than your traditional direct-to-market buy.
Cool.
It's a lot heavy stuff.
That was good.
So in that case, though, I know another hot button item is fraud. Obviously, when doing programmatic, you're susceptible to fraudulent activity. You know, there's bots on these sites that are posing as actual consumers, and you don't know who's actually seeing your ad.
Right. That's also kind of another misinterpretation that traditional media is also susceptible to fraudulent and bot traffic. And with PMP, the latest controls, like if you couple with brand safety, some company like Double Verify or Integral Ad Science, if you run that along with our normal PMP controls, it actually allows your ads to run in like a much more safer environment than traditional as well.
Spoken like a bot.
Definitely like a bot. But it's interesting that you mentioned traditional media, because as a strategist, I think I know exactly, in my plans, I know exactly where my ad is going. And I know, therefore, that my strategy is effective. And I think that's the issue that a lot of people are having.
Well, another misinterpretation is
add it to the list.
Misinterpreting everything.
Apparently.
All right, bring us back to earth here. My God.
Is that there's no real ways and no transparency, when in fact there is. I mean, there's certainly, like through DSPs, there's certainly ways to see transparently and optimize in real time, actually much faster than your normal standard media buying practices.
So then in terms of media buying practices, I mean, I think the largest issue for me and for a lot of people in the industry is, if programmatic becomes so automated and so accurate, what does that mean for people on the media planning and strategy teams? Where does our job fit into that space?
I kind of understand your concern, but it's more of the media planner's job is going to have to evolve because there's still like the human element involved. You're still going to have to plan around what publishers you want to work with. You're still going to have to plan around what data segments, what audience buys you want to work with. In addition to that, after you run on a private marketplace, you can use those insights and help plan out for future campaigns as well. So that's a really important aspect.
Yeah, so I think that is really important, and the way that we get more comfortable as an industry moving more towards programmatic is understanding then that it is both an art and a science, and it sounds like you're saying that we do still need that human component
Absolutely.
In order to activate it. And in that case, I'm a little relieved.
So you guys agree?
Good.
We do agree.
We do.
That's kind of disappointing. Follow-up question then, to
Call to
hopefully get
action.
you guys to disagree on something here. Right now, programmatic works, it seems at least, because the cookie functions as the industry standard of identification. What happens as we move beyond the cookie and that industry standard potentially becomes jeopardized?
Well,
Kayla, I'm assuming this is happening.
Yeah, that's a Paul thing.
okay, I'll take it.
Take it.
I think as the industry moves forward, we're going to see companies that have like large login, like unique user ID is what it's called. So like companies like Facebook, eBay, even Google that have the ability to track users based on their login data. So as they go cross device, they're on their mobile, they're on their laptop, they sign in with these unique user IDs, and that's going to be where. I mean, and another problem with that is all these companies are currently siloed. So what we're going to have to do is get some kind of third-party company or some other third-party section that kind of gets it all into one place, so like advertisers can grab it and use that data.
Well done. Well done. Well done. Thanks, everyone. All right, thank you. All righty. Next up are Gary and Danielle. Alrighty. Topic here is targeted advertising. One of the biggest appeals of digital advertising is the ability to reach the right audience with the right message at the right time through targeted advertising. But as the amount of data available to advertisers continues to increase, whether it be retargeting or purchase data, is hyper-targeting intrusive or providing relevance to consumers?
Well, I think that it depends on how the consumer perceives it. I mean, if a consumer keeps getting retargeted, they can find that to be incredibly intrusive, not to mention creepy at times. I mean, think about the Target example where a woman's family found out she was pregnant because Target started targeting her for being pregnant. I mean, that's kind of creepy. It's a bit invasive, and when ads get reshown to you all the time, it's just flat out annoying.
Sure, Danielle, but well, it's clearly we're on different stance here. In the era we're in right now, digital advertising, targeting is really the bread and butter for advertisers like us because it not only provides efficiency for advertisers, but also relevancy for consumers. And if you go out to look at research, they all support the same idea that targeting is good. For example, AdAge just recently revealed a study that targeted ads are 10 times more effective than non-targeted ads. And on the consumer side, Razorfish study also found out that a majority of users actually opt in for targeted advertising so that they can have relevant information delivered to them.
Got it. Wow.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up the bread and butter, because I think at the end of the day, like, our consumer is our bread and butter, and their sentiment is really important. So even though we don't intend the ads to be intrusive, if the consumers are perceiving them that way, then they're intrusive. And I'm also glad you brought up Razorfish, because they had a study recently that 79% of mobile users find advertisements that are targeted to be an invasion of privacy.
Sure. I mean, it may, well, but of course, none of those information that advertiser we have is personal identifiable information. There are anonymous and hashed out metadata. And when you talk about being intrusive, targeting is not about intrusive. Targeting is about enabling advertiser to develop a relevant or meaningful relationship with the consumer. And not to mention that right now, users have the ability to opt out too.
I mean, I think we're on the same page with the consumer. We're definitely in agreement that the consumer is who's important here, but that PII is something we as advertisers know is not what's being collected. But when a consumer reads headlines like, you know, data is being found out and hacked into, you know, a consumer thinks that their PII is out there and is, you know, they feel invaded. Not to mention, opting out is not something that's, you know, well known how to do. I mean, it's something that has to be done as opposed to opt-in is the default. And at the end of the day, we still want to be able to collect their data to learn behaviors.
Sure, I agree. You know, in the industry, we have to make a better effort of educating consumer how to opt out. But right now, we're getting there. Look at big advertisers out there like Google or a third-party organization like Ad Media Council. They're all educating consumer how to like opt out and how to safeguard their own data. And of course, hacking happens. But make an analogy,
Yeah.
right?
Piece of cake, you know?
Exactly. And an analogy will be like, let's look at out there in society. Do bank robbery happens? Sure, but does that mean we shouldn't put our money in the bank? No. As long as the benefit outweighs the cost, then there's some value out there.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So last night I wanted to buy a gong instead of using my Horn app, but it's fine. It's working well. And then this morning I woke up to an advertisement in my Facebook feed for a gong store. It's annoying and makes me skeptical not just of that ad, but of native advertising in general. In the future, how do we prevent this?
Well, first of all, I have to say, yeah, you didn't buy a gong. You have worked out better than this one, but you know, targeting advertising is evolving, and you know, there are a lot of data scientists in the back end trying to improve the algorithm, and you know, while we're evolving, we're going to weed out some of the creepiness too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the end goal here, is to weed out the creepiness. We don't want our consumers to be creeped out. We want them to feel like we're there for them and not creeping them out. And I think Target, back to my example earlier, they actually did this by sending advertisements in addition to baby coupons and not just, you know, pregnancy coupons only.
Final world, baby coupons. All right, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All righty, next up we have the lovely Amanda and Kathy. What's up, guys? Topic here is mobile. Over 80% of all internet connections now come from mobile devices. Last year, time spent with digital surpassed TV. However, this year, time spent with mobile devices has surpassed the time spent on desktop. We all know consumers are on mobile and is forcing brands to behave differently. Does this mean our investment in mobile should follow suit?
I'll start. I think my answer is not a hard no. I think it's a proceed with caution.
Okay. Allowed.
Great. I'm glad. I'm not debating whether or not consumers are there. I think we all know that consumers are definitely there, and as such, we as advertisers probably need to be there. But what I do think is that there are still a lot of gaps in the technology, in the way that we're messaging people, and the way that we're targeting them, that advertisers should not rush blindly and go all in with their budgets. I think that there's definitely a proceed with caution, and some of those things should be taken into account.
Okay.
So I'm not going to disagree with her, because I agree that, you know, you should proceed with caution. You should think about your strategy before throwing over a budget. But speaking to the privacy and technology issues. So we know that there isn't, a universal solution, but there are companies like TapAd or Drawbridge, and they're using soft IDs to be able to identify devices. And there are plenty of other different solutions as well. The industry as a whole, we've been moving forward, and we're identifying standards to, I guess, get everyone on the same playing field, so that we can all follow certain things.
I agree. I mean, I think where my concern is that a lot of these new products and technologies, while interesting and can probably definitely solve for certain challenges that other mediums can't, they are in their infancy. And I think it is dangerous to truly invest in things that frankly still have bugs. And so I think there are other ways that advertisers can prioritize mobile, particularly with things like BuzzFeed, Facebook, Google, all of these platforms that already have a very high mobile footprint, mobile following, mobile traffic. There are ways to really think about your messaging and your content in those areas and make sure that that is done right before you move on to moving your budgets into areas where it might not solve for what you're trying to solve for.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too that we, as agencies, are asking partners the right questions. So I think if we have a base understanding of what publishers can do and the technology behind it, we'll be able to select better performing partners and be able to optimize towards the best performing campaign. As far as tailoring content, I think it's really important to think about the features that are unique to mobile. So beyond just optimizing current creative on desktop and just passing it over to mobile, I think there's a bigger opportunity to think about location, the portability, the immediacy factor, and that should tie into your overall mobile strategy.
Okay, cool. So with all that said, what is the future of mobile advertising? What do advertisers need to do to determine how much money they should invest in mobile?
I'm going to start and say that there isn't a simple formula to determine a budget for mobile. Mobile can't be siloed. We can't get the scraps from the digital teams that are left over, but I think mobile needs to be considered upfront in the overall campaign strategy. And once we identify mobile's role in the campaign, then we can start to determine what budget should be allocated.
Yeah, I would say that the future of mobile is making it better. The problem with mobile is not mobile itself. It's not the devices. It's not the way that consumers are using it. It's the advertising that's on mobile. And I think it's time that we stop saying good enough is actually good enough and just putting our money there because it's the only thing that's there, and instead pushing ourselves, pushing our advertisers, pushing our partners to really get better and to develop the products that consumers want and need and that do make sense.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, but I think it needs to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll leave you guys to it. I will not do any of that. Thank you very much. Alrighty, last but not least, we got Bill and Ryan.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? How we doing?
Going good.
All right. Sweater, jacket. I still just look. All right. Topic is native advertising. With native advertising, brands have found a way to connect to consumers through promoted content with trusted publications. According to MediaPost, 54% of consumers say they do not trust promoted content. With that in mind, is native advertising a good or bad practice?
Great. Well, thanks, Brian. I think I'm just going to hop in on this question and go first. So I'm going to take the stance that native advertising is not a best practice and is in fact deceptive and intrusive. Bill, I want you to imagine for a second. It's Monday. It's a Sunday morning, and you're reading the New York Times. You come across an article for about a new disease and how to treat it, only to find out later that it was sponsored by a large pharmaceutical company. How would you feel about that?
Fancy that.
Yeah, I mean, that's intrusive. But what I think that is a bad example of native advertising. And native advertising could really only be unethical if it's done the wrong way. My main takeaway here is that as consumers, we don't want to pay for extra content. We all saw the John Oliver skit, and that's the end game, really, of this skit, that consumers don't want to pay for extra content. People want access. And all this content is moving online, and people are going to go and try and find it. We know that banners don't work for engagement. There's the Business Insider piece that says you're more likely to survive a plane crash than you are to click on a banner ad. I mean, that is crazy. So what do? We use native advertisement for engagement. Finally, what native could do is it could educate the consumer, and it could also provide value for the brand, which is a win-win for all of us, right?
No, I see what you're saying, but just to Brian's original intro here, 54% of consumers don't trust sponsored content. So just to that point, it's misleading, and people think the brand is only going after their money. It's my personal opinion that advertisers are better off providing content that is meaningful and actually provides value and utility to their target.
Sure, and I mean, yes, we obviously want to provide value and utility, but the thing is, native advertising has been around forever, just in different forms. Think about when you get in the car on a Monday morning and you turn on the radio and your local DJ is doing a plug for a CPG brand. That's native advertising. You turn on the TV, you watch an infomercial, native advertising. Various print publications, you could just go in and just book a print advertorial, and that's native advertising. So it always has been here. It's just that now it's moving into the digital space, and that's why this whole discussion is happening.
No, Bill, I hear you, but that doesn't mean it's a best practice. I mean, in my opinion, native advertising, the way it's often being used, is not adding value and can even appear as propaganda. I want to reference an example to the Church of Scientology and the Atlantic magazine. So what we saw was the content that was published by the Church of Scientology did not match the content within the rest of the publication. It felt like it was self-promoting content, and it wasn't adding value to the actual audience that does read the Atlantic. Yeah. So there was so much backlash actually to that article, they had to pull the content altogether. Yeah. You can't possibly think that is a meaningful connection that they're making with their consumers.
No, it's not. It's not. And that's a very sad and bad example. And hopefully our brands...
bad examples left and right.
Yeah. hopefully our brands don't take that route. But if brands do this correctly and tie it to relevant content, then it's a win-win. It's as simple as that. Speaking of examples, I'd like to call on one, which would be the New York Times and Orange is the New Black.
Love that show.
It's great. So New York Times runs a piece all about the rise of women inmates and what it means for society. And it's hard-hitting, it's editorial, and it's sponsored by Orange is the New Black. So what happens here is that we're seeing a trusted source in the New York Times provide editorial on a very important subject. And then we're seeing extra consumers come in and be more likely to read this content because it's sponsored by their favorite show. So if it's done like that and not done like the Atlantic and Church of Scientology example, then I think we're moving in the right direction.
All right, really quickly, as advertisers, do you see our role in the future as one where we reel in native, either out of a perceived moral obligation or to maintain its effectiveness? Or is it our job to just push this as far as we can take it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as advertisers, it falls on us to regulate this. We need to state its promoted content. We can't be deceiving the consumer. But yeah, as long as it's stated that it's promoted content, then we're doing the right thing.
No, real quick, I know we're out of time, Bill. To that point, I agree with you. I think it's our responsibility as advertisers to interrupt consumers with our messaging and not actually trick them into interacting with our brand. So if done correctly, there is a place for native in the future.
Thank you guys very much. Alrighty, so that concludes our debate. Thank you very much for joining. We are now going to pass it on to Taylor, Henna, and Millie.
Hi. Our debates focused on just a few areas of how our industry is constantly evolving, really just to keep up with the change in technology and how consumers are consuming this, this rapid content. So really, we want to provide you with a recap of all the different discussion points so you can take back this debate with your agency and your team. So first, Jeff and Aaron, they kind of touched upon their personal struggles of how that traditional TV consumption is really shifting over to online video. I think it's safe to say that TV is not dead and it won't be anytime soon, but how at the traditional agency roles do we really need to shift that over to the way that this content is being viewed? Then Kayla and Paul debated how programmatic is it really the most efficient and effective way of reaching different consumers? One point that Kayla had mentioned was that programmatic is not only a science, it's also an art. So do we really need to focus on having that human element when we activate programmatic? And then Danielle and Gary, they focused on how the advancements in our targeting capabilities are really allowing our advertisers to be more relevant. But at what point are we being too intrusive?
Then Amanda and Kathy debated the visible consumer shift to mobile and the perceived sense that advertising methods have not yet caught up to the platforms and what we need to do to make it worthwhile. Lastly, Brian and Bill argued the practices of native advertising and if it's disruptive to the consumer or if it's unethical, and when is it really too much. And all these discussion points are the scratches of the surface. Not one person can predict the technologies or the devices that we'll be using in 10 years or what the trending app will be, but we do know that it's changing and evolving at an ever rapid pace.
Thanks, guys. So data and technology is really allowing us to better understand our consumers and really identify those fleeting moments where brands can be relevant. Digital is making our experiences more immediate, more accessible, more scalable, and really now we have those tools to talk to the right person with the right message at the right time more than ever before. So in the future, moments and opportunities for brands to reach people, we think it's safe to say, will continue to multiply. So we've talked about how the industry is adapting to reach consumers where they are, but how do we continue to evolve? Ultimately, we think it comes down to the people, us agency representatives, keeping ourselves educated and constantly reinventing ourselves to properly respond to the ever-changing digital landscape. Because at the end of the day, digital is really only as meaningful as the people behind it. So now I'm going to pass it off to Nika and the panelists for a Q&A discussion, and if you haven't sent in your questions already, please do so on Twitter.
Hi everyone, my name is Nika Rastakis and I'll be moderating today's Q&A panel discussion. I actually work in strategy on the creative side, and again, thank you all for joining. If you could just take a couple moments, introduce yourselves, and let us know a little bit more about your background.
Sure. I'm Kate Tyler. I work in account management on the creative side at Saatchi & Saatchi.
I'm Katie Brown. I work on the creative side in account management at J. Walter Thomas.
I'm Rachel Fox, and I work in digital planning at BPN.
I'm Sam Nemi, and I work in search at MEC.
So thank you all for being so engaged throughout the last 30 or so minutes, and thanks for sending a lot of questions to us. So we're just going to get started here. The first great question is actually about brands and clients. So question to all of you is, how can advertisers help brands move forward in these turbulent and dynamic times?
Let me take a stab at that one. So I think that one of the most important things in order for that to happen is for the relationship between brands and their agencies or media companies, creatives, whatever it may be, to adapt and change and move forward. So right now I feel like it's really a lot of the whole, this is our client, we treat them as such, and a lot of people throw out the word partners. And I don't know if that's really built into the way we work. And I think in order for that to really happen, we need to start in the process earlier as far as the brief, for example. So earlier on when the client is creating this brief and building it out and thinking about our audience, they need to tap into the media agencies and use them as a source of information, because there's so much information about the audience through multiple mediums that they can take advantage of. I don't think they do that well at this point in time.
I think to build on that, another thing that we should always consistently do is continue to educate ourselves and the people at our agencies to then inform our clients and stay on top of things, because things are changing so quickly. And to Sam's point, like, to be our clients' best counsel, and in order to do that, it's consistently educating ourselves and then sharing that knowledge.
Since you're all, I mean, we have creative here and we have media here, so we have the right balance of agencies there. Do you feel like cross-channel planning is really working right now, and where do you see its future going?
I think that there is an issue with consistency across cross-channel planning, because I think that a lot of times we look to our clients to set the stage for us and how we work with our partners. And I think that what would be a better way for us to approach it is really start kind of setting the stage ourselves and start earlier in the process in the collaboration so that we're not just waiting for our clients to tell us how to work together. We're already working together when they come to us with a brief.
So the next question that's coming through is, as new forms of media develop in the future, how do advertisers decide if they do or don't belong there?
So I think it's really important to consider where your consumers are already engaging, and I think in turn those platforms or the new media will be where you're getting the most engagement. However, I think it is important for brands to think about the platform and if it really makes sense for their brand messaging. You obviously don't want to be in a place that doesn't make sense for your brand. It will look very inauthentic.
And I think to build on that, if your brand is uncomfortable or unfamiliar with a specific, I guess, most likely digital channel, just continuously testing and learning and pushing out those opportunities with small budgets to your clients to see what works, and then building on that is something that at my agency we do a lot.
Definitely.
Taking off your advertising hats for a second, and putting on your consumer hats, how does it make you feel as a consumer when you see a brand in a space or a new platform that you weren't expecting? Do you embrace it? Does it feel uncomfortable, unnatural, inauthentic? What's that like for you as a consumer?
I think it all depends on context and who the brand is and what platform they're on. Like what Katie said, it really has to make sense and for what consumer demographic you're trying to go after. For instance, brands coming into Facebook these days, I don't feel like that's all exciting. But I just started following GoPro on Instagram, and to me, understanding that they're able to crowdsource a lot of really cool images and while also integrating the product, that makes perfect sense, and it seems like a perfect marriage of brand and platform.
I think another really good example of this recently was Dove using Snapchat as a safe space for girls to kind of share their concerns about self-esteem. And I think that was very unexpected, but they used it very nicely to tell their brand story. So it made sense for them.
Kate, this is more of a specific question for you. With digital being so critical in our lives and moments, why do you think some brands are still hesitant to allocate their media dollars into this landscape? And this is, knowing that you come from more of a traditional client background.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that TV's, first, it's really familiar. We've been using it for a really long time, and it's proven to work. Our clients really understand that ROI and that sort of mass reach and mass awareness. Works for them, considering that our target for any one particular campaign launch could just be boomer women in one region of the country. So TV seems like the perfect medium from that sense. When we want to get really niche and super targeted with our demographic, I think digital makes sense. But one barrier there is just lack of knowledge and not really understanding the platforms or the mediums themselves. So that's sort of where the onus gets put on us as the brand's best counsel to educate them and kind of test and learn, like what Rachel said. But for the most part, TV feels safe. It feels like it definitely does work. So we have that sense of cushion there, and that's sort of the cycle that we're seeing.
So I just want to jump in from on my side. Sometimes it seems like it's tough to get a client to open up and actually be willing to even hear about that digital side.
Right.
And I think it's important for brands in general just to be willing to take risks, whether it's in digital as a whole or specific niches within it.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to educate our clients on the different KPIs of each of those media channels in order for them to take those more risky leaps, because it's important to make sure that they're on the same page as us, because sometimes I think just being in the agency world, we get caught up in knowing the point of each channel, and it's really important to have your client aligned on those KPIs before making any kind of recommendations.
Sam, search guy. Here's a question for you. So we've discussed a lot about new and emerging media platforms, but let's talk about search. So what's the future of search and the role it plays in the future of digital advertising?
So obviously, digital advertising as a whole is growing, but from a search perspective, I think the concept of going to a search engine to get information, to get an answer, and to navigate through to certain areas is going to change. And it'd stay the same, but what's going to change is going to be the fact that people aren't just typing in words. It's going to become more conversational. So one technical aspect is that with Siri and now with Google, for example, you can talk to the search engine. And you're actually asking questions, and it's responding back, and it even remembers what you asked previously, so it starts this dialogue and this conversation. Whereas previously it was, you search and you get all these results, and now not only is it talking back to you, but the algorithm actually remembers what you said to it and is continuing that conversation. I think it's important that we take advantage of that and keep in mind the term conversation, because it starts on search or on TV, creating awareness, which may come to search, and from there it's creating a strong user experience and the strong communication to get them down that purchase funnel off your website or wherever else you're selling products.
Now let's talk about talent. So again, this whole discussion and presentation today is all about the future of digital advertising, and really where a lot of that starts is with the people. And would love for all of you to be able to answer this one, is what's one piece of advice you'd give to new talent in our industry? Sure.
I guess one piece of advice I would give is to be proactive. I don't think that we can rely on our organizations or our companies to offer up opportunities such as Google Squared or other sorts of higher learning training programs for us on a regular basis. It's something that we need to seek out on our own. What you put into this industry is what you're going to get out of it, and so we all need to sort of take that step and go seek out those opportunities and make time for it on our own.
I think to Kate's point, I think learning is important at every single level in your career, and I think it's really important for you to prioritize that and always make time for it. And we actually heard in one of our speakers' presentations, he said that we should always be learning what we don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I've really taken to heart and would love to continue doing myself.
That being said, he also said he woke up at like 4 o'clock every morning and read for 2 hours. So
Yeah,
if you want to do that, great.
Tough question. I think that one piece of advice would be to find leadership at every level of your agency. So if you are just an assistant, finding a place on your team or a role that you can take and lead your team, I think leadership is a great way to learn. So I think that's my advice.
My advice would be to know when to take a step back and be as self-aware as possible, because it'll let you know what's going on with your company, what's going on with you in your growth process, as well as what are you learning and what more do you need. So it's being able to be self-aware.
So we have our last question. It's a pretty big one, and it's all about the agencies. So what are some structural changes agencies can make internally to better equip the constant change in the digital landscape?
So I think as a culture, we're really focused on entrepreneurial skills, but I think our agencies could do a better job of identifying entrepreneurial skills and really empowering those people that have those skills to drive change and innovation from within. But I think as entrepreneurs, and I think that we can all consider ourselves entrepreneurs here.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that means?
So I think an entrepreneur is someone that's really constantly pushing for change and pushing for things to be done better.
Within their company.
Within their company. So I think if that can be processes, that can be even pushing your clients. I think, though, as entrepreneurs, we can't sit back and wait for our leadership to identify us and empower us. I think that we still have to take responsibility to kind of find those opportunities ourselves, like Kate was saying earlier, and constantly keep learning and pushing for the change.
Great. Any other thoughts?
I think we need more free food, and I think that would make a big difference. No, I think it's all about collaboration. So it's really connecting all the teams together and being able to get as much knowledge as possible.
Yeah.
Knowing what your resources are and just continue down that road and get as efficient as possible in those kinds of areas.
And I think that's something that's been so unique throughout the last 6 weeks, is that sometimes we're not exposed to how the other half lives, and by that I mean creative doesn't get to see the ins and outs of media and vice versa. So in that way, I completely agree.
It's sort of opening up more of those doors and windows of opportunities to see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Thank you for all of your input and great discussion. And to our production team and all of the other squares who you did not get to see today, thank you for everything. And finally, on behalf of the entire Squared program, thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you in the future.
Thank you.